Cybersecurity has changed dramatically. In fact, wars are no longer fought on, battlefields.
Yeah.
They're fought online. Everyone used to say, it's not going to happen to me. I'm secure. I've built the right defenses. I've got the right infrastructure in place. I've put the right security in place. It won't happen to me. And then it does. And that's when it starts becoming top of mind. We spend our time educating and creating awareness around zero trust. That then leads to help customers kind of understand what that zero trust journey could look like. And through that, develop a kind of gap analysis to say, this is where I am today. This is where I could be tomorrow. And how do I get there? Having to take the decision on your own is always going to be a challenge because it's a risk. It's a 50% chance that you're right or you're wrong.
Welcome back to another episode of the Change Officer podcast that is brought to you by our friends at Poddster.com. If you are struggling to connecting with your ideal clients or getting your business a necessary brand awareness, hit them up and find out how creating your podcast can skyrocket your network growth and increase pipeline. All right, in today's episode, we're going to address one of the hottest topics on every company's recent agenda, and it's cybersecurity. We will try to uncover why so many ransomware attacks are happening recently and how can companies protect themselves and their data against these kind of cyber attacks. To do that, we had to invite an expert to our studio, so we approached Avinash Advani, founder and CEO of CyberKnight, a cybersecurity company that centers on zero trust technology. In the next 40 minutes, we will deep dive into the topic of protecting the cyber world and learn a little more about Avinash's journey from a developer at Cisco to CEO of a cybersecurity giant. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the Change Officer, Avinash.
Good morning, Vuk. How are you?
How's it going, man?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Really happy that you're here, man. We had a great conversation. Not sure if we'll manage to pack everything that we discussed in our pre-interview in the podcast, but we're going to try to get the sweetest bites.
I'll do my best.
From that prep. So you have a very interesting career behind you.
Thank you.
You started in Silicon Valley in 2000s in Cisco, right?
That's right.
You've been a CEO of several companies. And then eventually you founded CyberKnight.
That's correct.
CyberKnight. Or maybe in the future there will be more.
Well, it is a team of CyberKnights, so technically you're right.
Exactly. Was cybersecurity passion from the start for you?
It became a passion for me when I moved to the UAE. Okay, in 2006. So I began my career in software development, right at the bottom, coding on a Cisco router system. And when I moved to the UAE in 2006, I immediately started a small systems integration company that was focused on Cisco technology, but specifically security and voice, because I saw that there was a big opportunity and an uncovered market, frankly. So that's when I got into it. So it's been about 16 years now.
Wow. How was cybersecurity back in 2006 and now?
Greenfield. Very nascent market, especially here in the Middle East. The concept of cybersecurity back then was very simple. A firewall. They used to have this Cisco firewall called the PIX firewall. That was the most well-known firewall. And a IPS, an intrusion prevention system. Without getting too technical, these were the two main kind of network devices. And then you had antivirus on the endpoint. And that kind of symbolized what cybersecurity was back then.
Wow. And now?
It's become a science or even an art. Cybersecurity has changed dramatically. We've had to evolve and adapt with the times. And as we all know, cyber attacks are now commonplace. In fact, wars are no longer fought on, battlefields. Yeah. They're fought online. So that kind of gives you perspective on the maturity or the change that has been observed in the cybersecurity landscape.
But it's strange because that's not visible, it's not tangible, and people are not aware of it. So very often, people are in general not paying attention to this.
Until now. And that's the irony.
Yeah. And there is a good example that we can talk about just to explain the impact of cyber attacks of Colonial Pipeline that happened in USA.
Absolutely.
Just a few days ago. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Colonial Pipeline attack was a ransomware attack. Okay. And this, ironically, ransomware attacks have been around for 30 years.
So what is a ransomware attack?
Absolutely. So a ransomware attack is when a attacker gains access to your environment, okay, and manages to put a file into the environment that somebody mistakenly, unintentionally, or intentionally clicks on, and then causes the entire system to get encrypted, meaning corrupted, okay? And then this will spread across the environment, and you will not be able to decrypt or get back your data unless you pay a ransom, which is a very large amount of money in most cases in large ransomware attacks. In fact, in the Colonial Pipeline case, it was around $5 million.
So they actually paid $5 million to hackers to get back the access to their files.
Let me tell you what's funny here. So in this particular instance, they paid the 4.4 or in that range of $1 million to the attackers to get an encryptor that allowed them to bring back their data or decrypt their data. But it was so slow that after paying the money, they ended up restoring all their data from backup and losing those few days of data in parallel. So they already paid the money, but the encryptor was too slow for them to wait. And because this was a critical infrastructure customer where you had gas oil pipelines, right, that were being impacted, it was creating oil price fluctuations. It was creating issues with people getting access to, critical infrastructure, that they decided just to restore everything from backup.
So the damage was not only $5 million that they paid to hackers, the damage was actually a lot higher.
Far more.
Is there an estimate?
Tough one, because not yet. I'm sure that very soon someone will come up with an estimated number around the specific loss, reputational, financial, political damage that was created by, this particular ransomware attack. But let me just give you a very quick perspective. Again, this is an oil pipeline, which means there are, oil covering the entire eastern seaboard of the United States, right? So we're talking about oil that's flowing across the country, that's supplying the eastern part of the United States, one of the largest markets in the world, if not the, right? And that is what people use every day to heat their homes, to go to work, to fuel their cars. I mean, we're talking about critical infrastructure. So the impact is tremendous in financial, reputational, and in a political sense too.
Wow. So, and there was another that happened like with Garmin. I think it happened maybe a year back.
Sure.
There is a lot of them.
Many. There's one that happened just 2 days ago.
Are we going to see more of this in the future?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, right? And I think that ransomware is one of the key cybersecurity trends in 2021. And as I said before, it's been around for 30 years, but yet it continues to be, a pain and a challenge for many organizations, because there are some fundamental, right, security frameworks and foundational elements that need to be in place in order to protect against ransomware that unfortunately the world has not caught up to, even the largest companies.
And it's interesting to bring into perspective the pandemic and the fact that people are working from home now. Is that how is that impacting cybersecurity?
Absolutely. So I just mentioned that ransomware was one of the key trends of 2021.
Yeah.
One of the other trends is the working from home syndrome or phenomenon that has happened because of the pandemic, right? So people didn't really have a choice. So suddenly you are forced to work from home, right? Over the last year or so. And many organizations have not come back fully to the office, right? Many of their employees are still working from home. So now imagine everyone that was sitting in the office before, and you could control your attack surface because everyone would be in the office. You protected the office and you're secure technically, right? We call that the perimeter.
Yeah.
Now, imagine that all your employees are working in these disparate locations around the world from home or potentially a hotel or a coffee shop or wherever. And now your attack surface has just exponentially multiplied because every single one of those nodes where they're operating from is a potential attack vector for a attacker to go after. I mean, just think about the scale, right? So that also is cybersecurity's, let's say, not only biggest challenge for the last 12 months, but also what attackers have been taking advantage of because now they know they can go after these individual entities, be it a wireless hotspot in a coffee shop, be it someone's home router, and they don't need to think just about that perimeter that used to exist in the office anymore. So it's been a major challenge for organizations to suddenly, overnight, evolve their cybersecurity, let's say, strategies to address this new phenomenon.
Wow. Tell me more about zero trust philosophy.
Excellent. So if you were to ask me a question and say, how does somebody protect themselves against ransomware? Or how do people address this remote working phenomenon or challenge because from a cybersecurity perspective? The answer would be zero trust security, ironically. So zero trust security is a concept and a framework that was created almost a decade ago. Okay. Over the last 7-8 years, it was very slightly adopted. Okay. Primarily because people had invested so much in traditional cybersecurity infrastructures and cybersecurity frameworks that for them, they wanted to get the most ROI from it, right? But if I just take you back for a second and remind you about that perimeter I mentioned.
Yeah.
Traditional security was based on protecting the perimeter. Okay.
Okay.
Now, when the perimeter is everywhere because data is flowing in and out constantly to remote users, cloud, mobile users, which is, of course, a massive evolution over the last decade, you now need to protect the data wherever it goes, however it's being accessed, whoever's using it. Okay. In order to do this specifically, right, you need to think about zero trust security. Mm-hmm. And what zero trust security does is it actually helps to protect the data, the networks, the applications, the cloud using this framework that was created about a decade ago, right? And over the last 2-3 years, it's begun being implemented by organizations as well as cybersecurity developers mm-hmm. and vendors alike. And so today it's very top of mind. And this is also a key cybersecurity trend for 2021, where people are beginning to understand the value now of zero trust security in order to address the ransomware issue, in order to address the remote working issue. And then the third biggest trend, right, is how to implement zero trust and evolve away from this traditional perimeter-based security into a trust-based security infrastructure.
Wow. Yeah. Companies are currently very often sacrificing security over speed. Is that true? Yes.
But it's more about looking at budgets and the limited budgets that exist, for any kind of IT spend, right? Mm. And with the pandemic, that has been more impacted. And when there are political influences to budget, that gets even more impacted, right? But let's take a quick step back and look at, why would someone look at speed over security, right? Yeah. Very simply put, it's about keeping the lights on versus securing the infrastructure. And if you have limited budget, right, and because the budgets aren't being provided or security was not historically a board level priority or they haven't been impacted by a ransomware attack, well, in this scenario, what are you going to do? You're going to spend the little money that you have to keep the lights on, right? The operational IT expenses. And in these instances, because connectivity with more users requires more connectivity, requires more bandwidth, requires more networking infrastructure. You have to continue to support your own employees as the employee base grows, as the company grows. And so, yes, that has always been a challenge, right? Because as more employees come to the team or the company grows, you need to be able to provide the speed required for them to operate in the same seamless manner. With that limited budget, that means there's less left for securing the infrastructure.
That's true.
Right? And so wherever budgets are impacted, security has always historically been left behind.
Yeah. So there are some interesting reports that are talking numbers, and people love numbers. So cybercrime cost to the world over $1 trillion in 2020. $1 trillion. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. They say the majority, 945 billion, was lost due to cybersecurity incidents, while the remaining 145 billion was spent on putting protection in place.
There you go.
Wow.
Yep.
They put 145 in protecting and then losing 900 and something. That's a lot of money. Why do you think that's the case?
Great analogy. Global warming.
Okay.
Great analogy.
All right.
Analogy. Global warming. For the last, since the Industrial Revolution, we've been creating all this impact to our planet and creating global warming impact due to, manufacturing and, ozone issues. And the point I'm trying to make is, at what point do people start to care about global warming? Well, now we're sitting here in Dubai, and we just read in the paper today that the temperature is going to go up to 51.8 degrees in the UAE at some point this week. Mm-hmm. That's high, right? People are going to start to care 100%, right? And now it's become a top of mind topic that people speak about because the impact is now felt tangibly. Okay. Let's go back to cybersecurity for a second. Okay. This is exactly what's happening, right? The cybersecurity attacks are increasing so exponentially, right? And the, let's say the impact of attacks like ransomware are becoming so much more costly that now it's starting to actually impact people and organizations on a global scale. So now it's starting to matter, right? And now it's becoming a board level priority. Whereas historically, it wasn't, right? Because everyone used to say, it's not going to happen to me. I'm secure. I've built the right defenses. I've got the right infrastructure in place. I put the right security in place. It won't happen to me. And then it does. And that's when it starts becoming top of mind. That's when the chief information security officer starts to worry about his job.
Everything is all right until it's not.
100%.
So what do you...
Human nature, right?
What do you guys at CyberKnight do when you're facing a company like that? How do you... what's your step-by-step process? How do you get them into this whole cybersecurity game?
Wonderful. Our go-to-market is really around being an advisor, a trusted advisor, right, to the enterprise and to the government organization that may not be as cybersecurity mature to have the defenses in place, like Zero Trust Security, for example, or SASE, which is even a newer version of Zero Trust. But what we do is we spend our time educating, creating awareness around Zero Trust. And the first time we ever talk to a new end user, a customer organization, it will only be to talk about Zero Trust. Not about products, not about services, but about Zero Trust. Because educating around traditional security and what Zero Trust brings to the table, including the benefits it brings, right? It's not just about security. It accelerates digital transformation by bridging the kind of gaps that get created with intelligent security. It accelerates cloud adoption by securing that journey. It accelerates the mobile user experience, which many people are leveraging today. And of course, the remote working dilemma that was created by the pandemic. My point is that we spend our time educating and creating awareness around Zero Trust. That then leads to help customers kind of understand what that Zero Trust journey could look like. And through that, develop a kind of gap analysis to say, this is where I am today. This is where I could be tomorrow. And how do I get there?
Well, so what would you say that is the biggest threat going forward?
There's the biggest threat in what sense? Like a cybersecurity attack?
Cybersecurity, yeah. That companies should protect from.
It changes every single year. And that's the bottom line,
ransomware
right?
is currently...
This year, and hands down, it's ransomware. I mean, just think about the last few days. Forget about weeks. We had Fujifilm in Japan. Fujifilm? Just 2 days ago.
Wow.
One of the largest conglomerates in Japan, right? You had JBS Foods, the largest meat manufacturer in the world. Brazil, Australia, South Africa, etc., etc. Now, let's take this for perspective. You say, oh, a meat company. Why does that matter? But put this in perspective. Is that not critical infrastructure? Will that not drive up food prices? Will that not make it unaffordable for some people? Will that not impact the ability for the organization to deliver food to human beings that need to eat to survive? That's critical infrastructure, right? This all happened, talking like the last 7 days. Okay, so my point is that it's going to get more and more rampant. And because here's the thing, cyber attackers are gaining from this, right? It's not like they're just picking these companies randomly. They're picking the companies where they're going to make money in the process, right? There's financial gain for them. Of course, there are other reasons why cyber attacks happen too. But the larger a network is, right, the less mature that organization is from a cybersecurity perspective, the better attack vector they are for a cyber attacker.
I just yesterday watched the video from Anonymous. They addressed Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you saw it, but they're threatening that they are going to attack him because he is trolling too much.
100%, because of his impact on Bitcoin prices, right?
Exactly.
It's impacted me too, trust me.
So
like the whole world. Yeah.
Hackers are using their skills sometimes for different reasons, not only for
no, for sure, 100%.
For financial gain.
Well, technically it is financial gain if you think about it, right? Yeah. Inherently, by attacking him, potentially he'll stop tweeting about Bitcoin and Dogecoin, and what'll happen? The prices will go up.
Exactly.
So financial gain.
No, exactly. Yeah.
More indirect financial.
This topic is super exciting and interesting, and we could talk for hours. I want to switch gears a bit now. I'm not sure how much chance do you have to talk about yourself, your life other than business. We are all Dubai is all about business, but we like here to talk about real life stories as well.
Sure.
So, you grew up in India and Oman, right?
So I was born actually in Oman.
You were born in Oman,
I was born
right?
in Muscat, yeah. And I was there for the first kind of third of my life.
Yeah.
I then went to boarding school, to an American school in India. I was there for 4 years. I wouldn't really call it living in India, unfortunately. I would have loved to live in the real India, but it was like an American school on a mountain, 8,000 feet above sea level in India. Wow. Great experience though. especially the boarding experience. And then I moved to the States after that.
You studied in States.
Yeah, I went there. I was there for university, and then I
started your career.
Started my career. Yeah. Absolutely.
What would you say in your early life, and let's call an early life from when you were born up till you're 20 years old? What would you say? What part of your life had the biggest impact on who you are today?
Wow. Great question. Okay. So let's take that into three different paths quickly, right? When I was very young, in Oman, I became very curious about computers and putting computers together and the early internet. And trust me, I spent a lot of my dad's money in this process, learning how to put computers together and using the early internet, which was not really accessible from Oman, unless it was very expensive. So that was kind of the first part, more curiosity. And my father and my family allowing me to kind of develop that curiosity. Then going to boarding school, that was probably a massive impact. The independence and the self-starting and the fact that you have to survive and live on your own without your family, away from them and only seeing them a couple of times a year. You're almost thrown into that, go out into the world and do it by yourself and succeed, if you can. And so that was definitely a key influence. At school also, I kind of got a lot of, the school invested a lot in training, and educating kids around IT and programming. I mean, I'm talking early days here, like,
you're talking about like primary, elementary school?
No, I'm talking about high school.
Or college. High school.
High school. So 13 to 17 kind of thing, right? But they spent a lot of money back then on IT and technology and teaching kids how to program and code and that kind of sort of evolved and matured my curiosity even further. And I started thinking, okay, I know how computers work now because I put a few together when I was in Oman. And now I learned how the software part works as well. And I was always thinking to myself, how great would it be to get an education where you learned about software and hardware together? And I looked for a university that provided a degree program, a bachelor's program that combined both software and hardware together. And of course was a good university. So that's how I identified my university in the US, by looking for a program that did both hardware and software combined. Went there to the US, and then obviously at university, got the education that I needed to really go deep into technology. And that's where I sort of learned kind of my characteristic traits around what my passion was in technology. And kind of where I thought I would go with my life from that point on.
Was formal education, and especially higher education, in your case, important and valuable for you?
I think
it's a very broad question. Of course, it was important, but how important was it? How big of an impact did it have on your life?
In my life, I think yes. Okay, because my high school education allowed me to develop my interest, in technology very early on. My university education actually is the reason that I got my first job at Cisco as an intern from university. And Cisco was a great landing platform and a landing pad because it's a big name, big organization. You learn a lot. And after spending, almost 7 years there, and plus the internship, you're very well recognized as someone that's coming from a reputable company, right? And so whatever you do after that, people will always remember Cisco, right? So it adds a lot of credibility to you. So my point is, I don't think that, not that getting into Cisco is the only achievement in life, but I think that
helped definitely.
Going to that particular university and getting that program definitely helped to go to Cisco, and that has definitely fueled my life. And going to that boarding school definitely got me into the right frame of mind around what kind of university I wanted to go to. So yes, education has indirectly and to a certain extent directly influenced my life and success so far.
Education is definitely a backbone of an economy and a country. Here in Dubai, we're working towards it. What part or element or what piece of structure of education in US did you particularly like? What made it so good?
In America?
Yeah, in America.
The US education, first of all, it's similar to boarding school. You're kind of on your own to fend for yourself because my family was in Dubai at the time. And so I was on my own, and that independence continued to develop, number one. Number two, the university system in the US is very flexible, or at least in my university, right? I don't want to speak for others, but it was very flexible. Yeah. It allowed you to pursue your passion, right? It allowed you to kind of shift your gears and change the direction that you wanted to go based on your own interests, but with good guidance, right? Around what's required to to succeed in certain areas and certain programs. And I think that flexibility is really important as you are developing your curiosity and trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, right? It gives you the platform to go in the direction you want, in a very structured manner, but it also allows you to then change and redirect that focus if you find something else more interesting.
Yeah.
It's a great platform, really, to understand what it is that you want to do with your life.
Okay. I love to explore this question because many agree that education is definitely a backbone and that we need to work towards it. And we're trying to kind of uncover what's really the right path for an individual to grow in an established and successful individual.
100%.
A question of different kind.
Sure.
If an average human life was 40 years only, how would you live your life differently?
Wow. If the average human life was 40 years only, how would I lead my life differently? I think that this might be a bit of a non-standard answer, let's say. But I think that I would, the focus that people put into their careers and into building success and the financial gains that you would get from those efforts, I think would be less important if you knew you were only living or only had the capacity to live to 40 years. There's so much that I personally want to see and do in life, be it travels and certain bucket list items that I want to achieve in my life. I feel that I've kind of staggered that and allowed time to achieve those things, knowing that, hopefully, right, that you live longer than 40 years. And so you'll build something, you'll create a foundation for your family and for your future and your retirement in order to be able to achieve all those over the course of your lifetime. If that was suddenly compressed or condensed down to 40 years, I think that the importance on work, on, let's say, career would be drastically diminished, right? And of course, everyone would have to do some kind of work to make some money, but I think life would be more about living in the moment. Not that it isn't now, but living in the moment and focusing less on building financial security, more on enjoying the smaller things in life. That's what I would personally do, because I think building a financial foundation, right, for the future, be it your future generations, or for yourself, is based on knowing that you have that time to then achieve what you want from that financial success. But so from my personal perspective, it would be reduce focus on financial success, more on enjoying the finer things.
We're going to leave an open-ended question for everyone out there, including myself and you. Why are we not living that kind of life if we live 80 years? What's the difference?
Good point.
We're not looking for the answer. This is for everyone to ask themselves.
Let's sleep on that.
There is a interesting global movement that is called How I Fucked Up. Excuse me, French, everyone. And we like to ask this question because we are naturally, everyone likes to celebrate successes.
Of course.
And that's what we should do. But we should celebrate failures as well.
Absolutely.
And this global movement, I'm not sure if you heard about it, they have events in Dubai as well. Well, people are basically coming in and telling their stories about how they failed.
Sure.
And how they learned from it.
100%.
Do you have a favorite failure of yours?
I've had many failures in my life, to be honest with you. There's no one favorite failure. I guess the one that would be, let's say, the most closest to home at this juncture would be that, when it's tough to call it a failure, but I'll say, I did mention to you that when I got into university, I did this program called computer engineering, which was combining hardware and software as a degree. And as I went through that, I realized that it was really interesting, but it was extremely technical. And of course, someone who's in technology should understand that and appreciate that. And I realized as I was going through university and going through this computer engineering program that my mind was more geared towards the business side of technology and less to the technical side of technology, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I still continued the path on the technical side. And when I started at Cisco, for example, I started off as a developer, coding an engineer, right? Software engineer. And I don't regret it at all because it taught me a lot. But if I were to look back and change that, I would have felt that I probably would have enjoyed taking a different path, taking the business side of technology and focusing on that approach versus a technical approach, because I don't want to call it a waste, but I felt like I'd invested a significant amount of time doing something that, let's say, it was a nice experience, but I would have had much more fun doing something more on the business side of technology early on in my career.
Yeah. Why do you think that was the case at the time? Why didn't you just said, drop technology, go for business?
I did in the end, right?
In the end.
But it took me 7 years to get there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that 7 years is a long amount of time in the big picture, but I just felt like in that first 7 years where I was doing all this coding, the amount of achievements that I personally felt I had, delivered was not significant. Personally, my own personal level of achievement. I felt I could have achieved much more, right? And grown much more business-wise, technology-wise, if I was on the other side of the spectrum. And I did go down that path in the end, right?
The end.
So again, it's tough to call it a mistake because it was a learning experience. But if I were to do it all over again, I would definitely go down the path of the business side of technology versus the technical side of technology from the get-go, because I would have felt that I would have enjoyed it a little bit more.
No, absolutely.
The
reason I'm trying to dig into this question, because there is probably an important lesson that you can learn, that you learned, and that everyone else can learn. How to make these kind of decisions, earlier rather than later. A lot of people are on crossroads and they need to make decisions.
100%.
Or they're staying within their comfort zone, because it's just easier to stay on a technical side than try to drop couple of exams now and roll on something different, maybe lose a year.
Right.
Which can potentially, on the long run, give me more benefit.
Sure.
How do you make these kind of tough decisions sooner rather than later?
There is no easy answer, Vuk. I'll tell you something that having people in your life, be it your family, be it friends, be it advisors, be it trusted confidants, be it your friends, and having them be a part of that decision-making process is very critical, right? Especially if they know or have experience in similar paradigm shifts, or if they have an understanding of both sides of the coin so they can guide you and advise you. Having to take the decision on your own is always going to be a challenge, because it's a risk. It's a 50% chance that you're right or you're wrong, right? You don't know, right? Am I making the right call about shifting or not? It's that simple, right? You don't know at that point in time, it's a gamble, right? Am I making the right decision? But if you have kind of like the advisory support, it greatly helps. So I would recommend anyone that's at that stage of their lives where they don't know what they're going to do.
Bounce off ideas.
Talk to the people closest to you, but look for someone or some people that actually have someone like a mentor who can guide you, who come from the experience of where you're looking to go.
Who was your most important mentor?
Who is my most important mentor? The irony behind this situation, Vuk, is because I chose to go down this path of technology, and both the technical side and the business side. Nobody in my inner circle came from this background. Not my family, my direct family, my parents, my friends. All my friends were on the business side. So I didn't have that support. And actually, if I were to look back and say why I took 7 years, that would be the reason why it took me 7 years to figure out on my own to go from the technical side to the business side, because I had to learn that on my own.
We reached the lesson learned.
There you go.
This is the lesson learned. All right. If there was are you more of a movie or a book type of person, or a podcast type of person?
What's the third one?
Podcast.
Okay. So great question. Evolution. Okay, here you go. So when I was younger, I was a avid reader of books.
All right.
And I still read a little bit now, ideally, but it's definitely decreased dramatically. Movies and films, always been very into it, but less as a child. In Oman, just because Oman was kind of, let's say, more disconnected from the rest of the world that had access to cinemas and stuff. When we of course had VHS tapes and DVDs, but then I was in boarding school, which again was on the mountain, so you had less your once a week option to see whatever movie they showed you. When I got to college in the US, that's university, that's when I got really big into movies, and I still am big into movies, but not as much as I was when I was in my early 20s. And then most recently, I've started getting into podcasts, mostly business podcasts that kind of support my industry, my kind of career path, my ambition. And of course, I've watched yours. So
now it's on the top of the list.
Definitely. No, but it's an area that I'm looking to continue leveraging on for my own learning experience.
Is there a book that you would say as that should be like in your view mandatory literature in high schools?
High schools, yes. I wouldn't say a book though.
All right.
I'd say a set of books.
All right.
That people could choose from.
All right.
Okay, so I felt that one way to get inspired and be motivated is to learn about people or a person that have done what you strive to do, right? And reading biographies, right, of successful people that you consider successful. By the way, everyone defines success differently, right? Everyone defines successful. It could be, I don't know, Warren Buffett, or Mark Zuckerberg as potentially. I'm just giving you one perspective, right? Could be the Pope. Yeah. I'm just saying that every single person has a Mother Teresa. Everyone has a different perspective on what is success. But if you were to read about that individual and how they've done it, what they went through, what their challenges were at a young age in high school, I think it develops insight into your own path and gives people much more kind of visibility into, well, do I really want to go down this path? Or, oh, that's how he did it or she did it. And it's a lot of lessons that you can learn from reading about other people that have been able to either succeed successfully or fail successfully.
No, absolutely.
Like you said.
And each of these biographies are containing stories of failure.
Of course. And that's what you find as a common theme in most of them.
Exactly. Extremely important to talk about successful people, no matter how you describe as successful people, to talk about the backstories, to realize how many failures they had before they reached that eventual success. So is there a book, is there a biography that influenced you or that you would
Honestly, I've read a lot, to be honest with you. There's no one particular biography that I can say, this is the one that has just, enamored me or empowered me to succeed. I keep reading them on a regular basis, and I follow different people.
We're going to collect a list of them and include them in the podcast description.
Sure. I mean, a great example for me was Warren Buffett. I mean, he's one of the guys that constantly sits in the back of my mind around. There's so many things that I learned from reading his biography and continue to learn today. Right. Yeah. The humility factor, for example, that surrounds Warren Buffett is second to none. I mean, he's one of the richest men in the world, but has chosen to live a very humble life, drive a humble car, live in a humble home. And I'm sure he spends on things that are important to him and his family, but it's important to learn. This is one of those characteristics that was important for me to learn from someone that has really achieved a lot in life and is such a sharp, shrewd business decision maker, but yet living such a humble life. Simple example.
No, yeah, beautiful. Those
Richard Branson was another one, right?
I love that one.
I love that guy, right? But he's a genius, but is a completely different approach to living like Warren Buffett.
Completely different approach.
But also very, he's ingenious. He's innovative. He thinks outside the box. He's failed multiple times, and he continues to. But then he uses that to fuel his success. And I don't know, every picture you've ever seen of him. Have you ever seen Richard Branson not smile?
No,
exactly,
absolutely not.
Every picture,
amazing guy,
right? I mean, that's these small things. I mean, you just feel that there's a lot of positivity that surrounds him. I'm not saying that when people take pictures that they're not going to smile, but it's a lasting.
But still, you can see through that smile. Yeah,
absolutely. So he's enjoying his success and his money, and he deserves it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, to wrap up, we're going to play a quick game. So I'm going to ask you a question and tell you one or another. You just tell me in one word which one you choose.
And why or no?
No, okay. just say the word. All right, let's go. Hollywood or Bollywood?
Oof, Hollywood.
Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos?
Jeff Bezos.
Burj Khalifa or Burj Al Arab?
Burj Khalifa. Tough one.
Day or night?
Day.
Karak tea or chai latte?
Karak tea.
Cricket or baseball?
Cricket.
Zuma or Ravi?
Depends. I can't answer that. Depends on the day. Zuma.
Crypto or gold?
Crypto.
Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Ethereum.
Microsoft Azure or Amazon AWS?
AWS.
Ants or elephants?
Definitely elephants. No thinking there.
$10 million or bonus 2 years of life?
$10 million.
Turning back time or seeing in the future?
Seeing in the future.
The Change Officer podcast or the Joe Rogan Experience podcast?
Definitely Change Officer.
Thanks for coming, Avinash.
It's my pleasure, Vuk. Thank you for having me here.
Guys, thanks for staying until the end. I hope that you enjoyed this fun episode with Avinash. If you like what we're doing here with the Change Officer podcast, please like and subscribe. Leave any comments that you have in the comments below. We'll be happy to reach out and answer you all of those. Reach out to Avinash if anyone tries to attack you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much.